The first one, go ahead and write down your Pythagoras theorem formula.
Yes, miss. Yes, miss.
Finish writing the Pythagoras formula, Peter.
Almost finished.
Morning, miss.
Good morning, Marlon.
Okay, I finished writing.
All right, so we're gonna go to the trig ratios. Should have shown you the other one first. Let's see if I show you the next trig
Miss,
ratio.
was
Start
that A
writing that
square
one.
plus B square?
A squared plus B squared
Miss,
equals
was
C
that
squared.
in the chain?
Mm-hmm.
Miss, I didn't write down, like, I didn't get to label the chain. That's all. I'll draw the chain, but I didn't. So, Miss, you can go back on it, please.
Mm-hmm.
C, D.
And this is Pythagoras theorem.
Oh, Python. Yes, miss, I'm finished. Yes.
All right, so we're gonna go with trig ratios. So when you're looking at the trig ratio, one of the important thing is you being able to label the triangle, right? So that's very important, you being able to label the triangle. So when you look at it, the hypotenuse is always the side opposite the right angle box. So that's always the hypotenuse. The opposite now, depending on the angle that you're looking at. So if you're looking from this angle that I just put in, then the opposite is the side opposite to it. But you're looking from the angle that they already have put in here, then the opposite is that side. Understand how the opposite works?
Yes, miss.
All
Mr.
right.
Can say that over, miss? Mr. Can say that over, miss?
So the opposite depending on the angle that you're looking at. So the opposite to this triangle is the one going here, the opposite side. So this is the opposite side. Good.
Yes, ma'am. Oh,
However,
sorry.
if we were looking at the other angle, the other acute angle, say we were looking at this acute angle, and the opposite side would be this side.
Yes, ma'am.
So it depends on the angle that you're looking at. The opposite might vary. So it
Yes,
is
miss.
sine theta. You normally see it like this, sine theta. I think it's on the formula sheet, to opposite over hypotenuse. If you want to put O over H, that's fine. And then you have cos theta equal adjacent over hypotenuse. And then you have tan theta equal opposite over adjacent. So there we have it. And we use this term SOHCAHTOA to help us to remember SOHCAHTOA, 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 SOHCAHTOA. Anybody know that tune? SOHCAHTOA, 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 SOHCAHTOA.
Miss,
Which
no
song does that?
idea. I have no idea.
Despacito. Da, 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 da.
Okay, miss, I get the point now.
You get it. All right. So you can use SOHCAHTOA to remember it. So S-O-H, Ka, C-A-H, Toa, T-O-A. What does O stands for? What does
Repeat,
O
miss.
stands for?
Opposite, miss.
Okay. What does H stands for?
Adjacent.
H.
Hypotenuse.
Okay. And what does A stands for?
Adjacent.
All right. So I give you another 2 minutes to have that in your book. 2 minutes is good.
Yes, miss.
It would be good for you to leave some space to the side because you're going to have a little bit more to put in. So we're going to discuss and then you're going to have a little bit more to put in. Finish?
Miss.
Is that a yes?
Yes, miss.
Marlon? Marlon? What happened to Marlon? Marlon? But when we move on, he's gonna come back and said he wasn't here. Marlon?
Miss, hope you not try to make an entrance, miss.
Go again?
Miss, hope you not trying to make an entrance, miss.
An entrance. Hope not. All right, so the rules that we have so far, right, must be used with a right angle triangle. Pythagoras theorem, use with a right angle triangle. Trig ratio, use with a right angle triangle. All right, so they must have a right angle triangle. When you're using Pythagoras theorem, you only use it when you're trying to find a missing side. So write that down for me. You only use Pythagoras theorem when you're trying to find a missing side. Only use Pythagoras theorem when you're trying to find a missing side. And it must be a right angle triangle. Must be.
Yes,
It
miss.
must be a right angle triangle. All
So,
right.
miss, so, miss, what if it was another type of triangle?
Then we're going to use sine or cosine rule.
Okay, miss.
Rule is different from ratio. So trig ratios, you have the sine, the cos, and the tan. But when it comes on to the sine rule now, right? It's different from and the cosine rule. So those are different. So let me see if I can share this with you so you can have an idea of what I'm saying clearly. You have that bit that I asked you to write down about the Pythagoras theorem?
Yes, miss.
All right, so you only use Pythagoras theorem when you're trying to find missing side. All right,
Yes,
so I'm going to
miss.
share this with you. Where is it? Is it there? Good. All right, so when we have If we can zoom in. Trying to zoom in, but this not allowing me to zoom in. Are you seeing it clearly? Oh, it's working now.
Yes, Miss Samsi. You are.
Yes,
Okay,
miss.
it's working now.
Yes, Miss.
Hello, Marlon. Nice to have you back.
Nice to
Alright,
make
so
a
we
nice
have,
to make an entrance, man.
yes. So we have Pythagoras theorem, we have trig ratios, and the next bit that we have is sine and cosine rule. So go ahead and write down your sine and cosine rule for me. You don't necessarily need to put, as long as you know how to transpose, you can just write this one down, like this aspect, right? You don't necessarily need to write down this part that says O for angles, O for angles. You just need to write down these bits, because as long as you know how to transpose, then you can always transpose to get your answer. So your sine rule and your cosine rule. Sine rule, cosine rule. We have that.
I'm at the cosine rule.
Miss, I'm almost there.
All right. Still hurry up and write that so we can get on.
Yes, miss.
Finish?
Yes, miss. It's
All
probably
right.
Peter's next.
Go again.
Right, so assuming me.
What was that?
Jesus. Right, so Mr. Man. I do my best to
You're
listen
not
to the.
finished.
I'm not finishing. Alright, to BC. Yeah. Can move on.
Okay, so um, read it as. So let's scroll up. Pythagoras theorem. Trig ratios, as you can see, trig ratios there. I want you to know the different aspects. All right, good. All right, so three different aspects: Pythagoras theorem, trig ratios, sine rule, or the rules, the sine and the cosine rule. When to use Pythagoras theorem and trig ratios now, they are used with right angle triangles. So when you're given a right angle triangle, you use Pythagoras theorem or trig ratio. How do I know if I'm supposed to use Pythagoras theorem or trig ratio? Pythagoras theorem, and I told Marlon, Peter to write this down already, so Marlon, you're writing. Pythagoras theorem is only used when trying to find a missing side. Pythagoras theorem or theorem is only used when trying to find a missing side.
Is only used to find a missing.
When trying to find a missing side.
Missing side.
Trig ratio is used to find missing side or missing angle. Say for instance, and it must be right angle triangle for both of them. All right. So use with right angle triangle, you can make a note of that. Say for instance, you get a triangle, right? And this, go again?
Miss what I say, trigger ratio is used to find.
Which trigonometry to find missing side or missing angle in a right angle triangle. So say for instance, you get this triangle and you see two sides. You ask to find the next. You see two sides. And you ask to find the next side. What would you use? Would you use Pythagoras theorem or would you use trig ratio?
Miss Pythagoras theorem.
You'd use Pythagoras theorem. All right, good. All right,
Miss,
so
what
for instance, you had an angle. Say this angle is 30 degrees. What would you use here? And you asked to find
trigonometry.
B. You asked to find B. What would you use there?
Trigonometry.
Trigonometric ratio. All right. So the only time we use Pythagoras theorem is when we have two sides and ask to find the third. Two sides, ask to find the next side, the third side.
So they have special triangle like we did too. I miss remember the detail for write down some special triangles.
Yes, so if you look at this was a special triangle. Say for instance, this was a special triangle, right? And this side was 10 centimeter. And this was 8 centimeter. What would be this side?
That's 100 plus.
This is one of the special triangles.
Oh, excuse me. 6, miss?
6. All right. So this is 6, 8, 10. So yes, so if you give it, if you see it like that, you don't need to work it out. You can just put it. Say for instance, you were given a triangle. So let's look at when we use a sine and cosine rule now. The sine and cosine rule is used when you're given a triangle that is not a right angle triangle. So you're given a non-right angle triangle to find a missing side or a missing angle. And that's when you use the sine or cosine rule. When do we use the sine or cosine rule?
And you find a side,
When
so
you're
you're finding
given
a
what
side,
type of triangle?
right angle triangle.
It can be a right angle triangle. So we use sine or cosine rule. These two I'm talking about now, not ratio, rule. So you have ratio and you have rule. So we use sine or cosine rule when given a non-right angle triangle.
Oh,
When given a non-right angle triangle and asked to find a missing side or angle.
used to find sides, miss, sides and angles.
Sides and angles. So I need you to know these so that when we start working out the questions, you'll know what to use. So you use the sine rule. Sine rule when given what type of triangle?
Non-right angle triangle.
And ask to find a missing side or angle. All right, so let's look at this this flow chart here. We're gonna come back a bit to sine rule and cosine rule, when to use which one. But let's look at this flow chart. Read the first thing in the flow chart for me, Peter.
Okay, the first chart
No,
is
that
the
Peter, where were you?
right here.
Peter,
Yes, miss. Yes, miss.
where were you?
Miss, I was
Where were you?
I was right here. Miss, I was right here.
Okay. All right. All right, go ahead, Peter, read the.
Is the triangle right angled? Yes. Does the question involve any angles? Yes, use trig ratios, sin, cosine, tan. Or if no, use Pythagoras Theorem. Read up
All right.
Pythagoras.
So if it involves angles, what are we supposed to use?
Use the sine, cosine, tan. The trig ratios.
The trig ratios.
Sine, cosine, and tan.
And if it doesn't have any angle and it's a right angle triangle, what do we use?
Miss the Pythagoras.
This?
Pythagoras, miss.
The Pythagoras Theorem. All right. And go over to the next side of the flow chart for me. Read Peter for me, the next part. To the right of the flow chart.
Okay. Do we know a side and its opposite angle? If it's yes, we must use the sine rule. There's no use of cosine.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
All right. So that gives us a bit of hint as to when we use the sine or cosine rule. So we're gonna look at the other we're gonna look on that a little bit more in depth. All right, so we're switching. I was trying to save that, but it didn't work. Let's do this again. So you're writing off this part. All right, the silent rule is used when we're given either two angles on one side or B, two sides and a non-included angle. Two sides and a non-included angle looks like this. So here is 25 degrees is 7 centimeters and 8 centimeters. So this is two sides and a non-included angle, mean that if the angle was included, it would fall right here between the sides. Understand?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, miss.
If the angle was included, it would fall in between the two sides, like right here. All right, so go ahead, write that down for me. When the sine rule is used and when the cosine rule is used. So when you finish,
Almost. Almost.
Finish, miss. Finish, miss.
Finish. Finish, Peter? Peter, Marlon?
Yes, miss, I'm finished.
Yes, miss. Yes, finish now.
Yeah. Okay. So we're gonna look at some questions now. Not necessarily working out the questions, but just to identify what would use in which case. See if we can get that. What would I use for question 1? What would I use for question 1? Am I using Pythagoras theorem, trig ratio, sine rule, or cosine rule?
I think it's sine rule.
What type of triangle are we looking at?
Right angle.
Right angle. Pythagoras, miss.
Would use Pythagoras? Do we use sine rule or cosine rule with Pythagoras with right angle triangle?
No,
No,
miss.
no, miss.
All right. So bear that much in mind. Let's look at some other question. What would I use for E?
For D.
E.
E. Oh, this is my screen wasn't shared. Miss same Pythagoras, miss.
Why do you say Pythagoras?
Because we're finding a missing side.
And you're given how many sides?
2.
You're given 2 sides and asked to find the third side. So that's important to know that you're given 2 sides. Because if you were given an angle, then and a side, then it would have been trig ratio. All right. All right, so before we go on, let's see if we can get our labeling correct. I give you permission to annotate. Label the first two triangle. Marlene, you're gonna do the first one. Peter, you're gonna do the second one. Label triangle using the words hypotenuse, adjacent, and opposite.
Miss, last night I could find, last night my combination with my pen, so I can't find it, but I'm gonna use my finger. Let's see if I can write good on finger, miss. If you notice, I can. So, miss, just gonna put
Okay.
H. So, H. Wait, how I do the first one, miss?
All right. All right, do the second one now, Peter, Marlon. All right, Marlon, do the third one since Peter has decided to do A and B. Do the third one. Go ahead, Peter, do B.
Right.
The adjacent, Peter. So this is the angle. And that side is opposite it. All right, so that's good. All right, so let's scroll down.
If we can write it properly, miss.
That's fine, we understand what you did. All right, what would we use to find the missing side here? Ratio or Pythagoras theorem?
Doesn't the sine rule, miss?
Huh?
Sine rule, miss?
What type of triangles are we looking at?
Miss right
Right
angle.
Do we use sine rule, or cosine rule with right angle triangles?
No, miss. You did non-rectangle triangle.
Okay. So what should we use here? So rule of sine rule and cosine rule. We have trig ratios and we have Pythagoras theorem.
Trig was
What should we use?
trig ratio. So
Trig ratio. Why trig ratio and not Pythagoras theorem?
trig. It's because we are given one side.
Because we're given one side and we're also given
Angle.
an angle. All right. So we can use trig ratio. Good, good. All right. So that brings us to the end of our lesson for today. The aim today was just for us to know the different one. So we know our Pythagoras theorem, we know the trig ratios, we know the sine rule and the cosine rule, and know when to use them and when not to use them. All right, so we know when to use them and when not to use them. All right.
Yes, right.
All right. So have a good day, all.
Thank you, miss.
I miss.
Bye.